In a powerful werewolf kingdom ruled by fear and silence, the Alpha King hides a dangerous secret that could cost him everything. When a quiet, observant new maid uncovers what no one else has seen, she becomes the only person standing between him and total destruction. Hey, beautiful souls! Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. How are you doing today? I hope you're ready for a tale that'll grip your heart and not let go. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join our pack of romance lovers. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. The stone floor was cold beneath Alara's knees as she scrubbed, her hands raw and trembling. The servants' wing of the Blood Moon Palace buzzed with whispers, but she kept her head down, her dark hair falling like a curtain over her face. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Don't matter. That had been her mother's last words before the fever took her 3 months ago, leaving Alara alone in a world that devoured the weak. Girl. Alara flinched. The head housekeeper, Madame Voss, loomed over her, her face pinched with permanent displeasure. Stop daydreaming. The Alpha King's chambers need servicing. Immediately. The other maids went silent. Alara's heart lurched. The Alpha King's chambers? Are you deaf as well as useless? Madame Voss snapped. His usual attendant was executed this morning for stealing. You'll take her place. And if you value your throat staying attached to your neck, you'll remember your position. Executed. The word stuck in Alara's chest like a blade. She rose on shaking legs, clutching her bucket of cleaning supplies. Around her, the other servants stared with a mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't them being sent into the lion's den. Alpha King Cale Thornheart was a legend wrapped in nightmares. 6 feet 5 inches of lethal muscle and merciless judgment. They said he could hear a lie from across the palace, that his wolf could scent fear like blood and water. He'd taken the throne at 17 by ripping out his father's throat in front of the entire pack, and in the 12 years since, he'd ruled the Blood Moon Kingdom with an iron fist that never trembled. No one defied him. No one survived his wrath. And now Alara was supposed to clean his private chambers while he was in residence. The walk through the palace felt like a funeral march. Alara's worn shoes whispered against marble that cost more than her entire life. Guards stood like statues at every corner, their eyes tracking her with predatory awareness. She kept her gaze down, her wolf cowering inside her chest. She was nobody. A lowborn servant with a weak bloodline and a wolf so small it barely registered on pack hierarchy. Her mother had been human, a fact that made Alara something shameful, something barely tolerated. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Don't matter. When she reached the massive double doors of the Alpha King's chambers, 2 guards stepped forward. One grabbed her bucket, dumping its contents onto the floor with a crash that made her jump. They searched her roughly, professionally, checking for weapons or contraband. Clean quickly, one growled. And don't touch anything you're not meant to. He's inside. Her blood turned to ice. Inside? But I thought. He doesn't like to be disturbed. Stay invisible. The door swung open. Alara stepped into a world of dark luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling forest kingdom, curtains of deep crimson framing the dying afternoon light. The furniture was carved from ancient oak, every surface gleaming. But it was the man standing at the window who stole every particle of air from her lungs. Alpha King Cale Thornheart. His back was to her, shoulders impossibly broad beneath a black shirt that strained against pure muscle. Dark hair touched his collar, and even from behind, power radiated from him like heat from a forge. She could feel his dominance pressing against her wolf, forcing it to submit, to yield. Alara's hands shook as she gathered her scattered supplies. She dropped to her knees and began scrubbing the already pristine floor, making herself as small as possible. Minutes passed in suffocating silence. She worked her way across the massive chamber, hyper-aware of his presence. He hadn't moved. Hadn't acknowledged her. Was he testing her? Waiting for her to make a mistake so he'd have an excuse to. A glass shattered. Alara's head snapped up. The Alpha King had turned slightly, his hand frozen in midair near a side table where a crystal tumbler now lay in pieces. Whiskey spread across the wood like blood. But he wasn't looking at the glass. He was staring at the doorway behind her. One of the guards had entered, his mouth moving. Speaking. Reporting something urgent from the tense set of his shoulders. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. His eyes, cold silver that could strip flesh from bone, remained locked on the guard's face. No, not his face. His lips. The guard's mouth stopped moving. The Alpha King nodded once, a sharp, controlled gesture. Tell the council I'll address their concerns after the moon rises, he said, his voice deep and commanding. And next time, knock before entering my private chambers. The guard paled. Of course, Your Majesty. My apologies. I did knock, but... Leave. The guard fled. Alara's heart hammered. Something was wrong. Something was off. The guard had said he knocked, but the Alpha King had reacted as if he hadn't heard any. No. Her hands stilled on the wet floor. The way the Alpha King had watched the guard's lips, not his eyes. The way he'd positioned himself to see the doorway at all times. The shattered glass, had he felt the vibrations of the door opening through the table? And the guard's words, I did knock, but... Alara's breath caught. The Alpha King turned fully, and those silver eyes landed on her like a physical blow. She dropped her gaze immediately, terror flooding her veins. You. His voice cut through the room. What's your name? Alara, Your Majesty. Her voice barely worked. Silence. She could feel him studying her, dissecting her, deciding if she was worth keeping alive. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she stayed frozen, barely breathing. Look at me when I speak to you. Alara forced her eyes up. And found herself drowning in silver fire. The Alpha King's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her wolf whimper and retreat further into the corners of her soul. Up close, Cale Thornheart was devastating, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from granite, and a mouth set in a permanent line of command. A thin scar traced from his left temple down to his jaw, a pale line against bronze skin that spoke of violence survived. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Silver like moonlight on water, intelligent and calculating, missing nothing. You're new, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty. This is my first day attending your chambers. Alara's voice trembled despite her best efforts. She kept her eyes on his, even though everything in her screamed to look away, to submit completely. His head tilted slightly. Speak clearly. I don't tolerate mumbling. Yes, Your Majesty, she repeated, louder this time, enunciating each word. Something flickered in his expression too fast to identify. He turned away, moving to the window again, his movements fluid and controlled. Clean the glass. Then leave. Alara scrambled to obey, gathering the crystal shards with shaking hands. As she worked, she couldn't stop her mind from racing. He watches lips. He positions himself to see everything. He demands clear speech. No. It was impossible. Ridiculous. The Alpha King was the most powerful shifter in 5 kingdoms. He could hear a heartbeat change from across a battlefield. Everyone knew that. But what if they didn't know? What if they just believed? She risked a glance at him. He stood perfectly still at the window, his posture rigid. Alone. Despite all his power, despite ruling thousands, he stood utterly alone in a room that suddenly felt like a prison. Alara's chest tightened with an emotion she had no right to feel sympathy. She finished cleaning and stood, backing toward the door. I'll return tomorrow, Your Majesty. Same time. He didn't respond. She was 3 steps from freedom when his voice stopped her. Alara. She froze. He hadn't turned around. Hadn't looked at her. How did he know she was leaving? The floor was stone, her footsteps were nearly silent. Unless he'd felt the vibrations. Your Majesty? Why are you here? He turned now, those silver eyes pinning her in place. In my palace. A half-breed with a wolf so weak I can barely sense it. Why hasn't your pack rejected you? The words should have cut. Should have shamed her. But something in his tone wasn't cruel, it was curious. As if he genuinely wanted to understand. I have nowhere else to go, Your Majesty, Alara said quietly. My mother died 3 months ago. She was human. My father, she swallowed. I never knew him. The pack allows me to stay because I'm useful. I work hard. I don't cause trouble. You don't matter, he said, and it wasn't mockery, it was understanding. Their eyes held. For a heartbeat, Alara saw past the Alpha King, past the legend, and glimpsed something raw and human beneath. Loneliness. The kind that carved holes in your chest and never healed. No, Your Majesty, she whispered. I don't matter. Good. He turned back to the window, dismissing her. That will keep you alive longer than ambition ever could. Alara fled to the servants' quarters, her mind spinning. She collapsed onto her thin cot in the corner of the dormitory she shared with 15 other low-ranking servants, pressing her hands over her racing heart. It can't be true. It can't. But the pieces fit too perfectly. Well? Mira, the girl on the next cot, leaned over. She was small and fox-faced, one of the few servants who'd shown Alara any kindness. Did you survive the monster's den? He's not a monster, Alara said before she could stop herself. Myra's eyebrows shot up. One meeting and you're defending him? Girl, he executed Prima this morning for stealing a ring. Ripped her throat out himself in the courtyard. Alara's stomach turned. She stole from him? A worthless trinket from his desk. But theft is theft. Mira shuddered. He doesn't forgive. Doesn't forget. You do well to remember that. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She kept seeing those silver eyes, kept hearing his voice asking why she was there, as if her existence puzzled him. And she kept thinking about the knocked door he hadn't heard. At dawn, Madame Voss appeared with a list of duties that would keep Alara in the Alpha King's wing indefinitely. You'll attend his chambers daily. Morning and evening. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look at him unless ordered. And for Moon's sake, don't do anything stupid. For 3 days, Alara followed the routine. She cleaned his chambers while he worked at his desk, reviewing pack business, signing documents, meeting with advisors. And she watched. She noticed how his advisors always stood where he could see them. How he never responded to sounds behind him unless they came with vibrations, a door closing, footsteps heavy enough to feel. How he read every document himself rather than having them read aloud. How he was always in control. Performing. Surviving. On the 4th day, everything changed. Alara was dusting his bookshelves when raised voices erupted in the corridor outside. She glanced at the Alpha King. He was seated at his desk, reviewing a map, completely unaware. The doors burst open. A man stormed in, tall, blonde, with the bearing of high rank. Kale, we need to talk about the northern border. Now. The Alpha King's head snapped up, his face hardening instantly. But Alara saw at the half-second of disorientation, quickly masked. Beta Marcus. His voice was ice. I don't recall summoning you. The rogues are organizing. We've had 3 attacks this week. Marcus's hands moved as he spoke, gesturing sharply. If we don't act. I'm aware of the situation. Kale stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. And I'll address it when I'm ready. Not when you decide to barge into my private chambers. Marcus's jaw clenched. His mouth moved something under his breath. The Alpha King went very, very still. What did you say? Deadly quiet. Marcus's face paled. Nothing, my king. What did you say? Alara's heart stopped. Marcus had muttered something too quiet for normal hearing, but the Alpha King demanded to know what it was. Because he hadn't heard it. And Marcus suddenly realized his mistake. The silence in the room was suffocating. Beta Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what he'd just revealed, not through his words, but through the Alpha King's reaction to them. Kale took a step forward, and Alara felt the surge of his power like a physical wave. His wolf was rising, pressing against his skin, turning his silver eyes molten. I asked you a question, Beta. Each word was precisely enunciated, sharp as broken glass. Marcus dropped to one knee immediately, his head bowed. Forgive me, my king. I spoke out of turn. I said he swallowed hard. I said the council is losing faith. The lie was obvious. Whatever Marcus had actually muttered was far worse. Alara's hands trembled on the bookshelf. She wanted to disappear into the walls, to become invisible, but she was frozen in place, a witness to something dangerous and intimate. Cale's hand shot out, gripping Marcus by the throat and hauling him to his feet. The beta was a large man, but the Alpha King lifted him like he weighed nothing. You forget yourself, Cale growled. You forget who gave you that title. Who allows you to breathe? My king. Marcus choked. Get out. Cale released him, and Marcus stumbled backward. And tell the council I'll address their concerns at tonight's gathering. They want faith? I'll remind them why they should fear me instead. Marcus fled, and the doors slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. Alara pressed herself against the bookshelf, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The Alpha King stood in the center of the room, his shoulders heaving, his hands clenched into fists. And then he turned those blazing silver eyes on her. How long have you been standing there? I was dusting, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to. How much did you hear? He stalked toward her, and every instinct screamed at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. He backed her against the bookshelf, bracing one hand beside her head, his massive frame blocking out the world. This close, she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, smell the scent of him pine and smoke and something wild. Her wolf, weak as it was, stirred for the first time in years, recognizing something it shouldn't. Power. Safety. Home. No. That was insane. Everything, Your Majesty, Alara whispered, because lying to him felt more dangerous than the truth. His eyes narrowed. Then you heard my beta insult me. Yes. And what do you think he said? What I didn't hear. The question was a trap. It had to be. If she admitted what she suspected, what she knew, he would kill her. He'd have to. The secret was too dangerous. But something in his expression stopped her from lying. A flash of desperation, quickly hidden. As if he needed to know if she'd figured it out, even though knowing would seal her fate. Alara's throat was dry. I think he said something too quietly for anyone to hear. And he was surprised when you demanded he repeat it. Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned closer, his mouth near her ear. Are you clever, little maid? Or just observant? His breath was warm against her skin. Alara's pulse raced, and she knew he could sense it, the fear, the confusion, and something else she didn't want to name. I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty. Liar. But there was no heat in the word. He pushed away from the bookshelf, putting distance between them. You've been watching me. I see you watching. Why? Because watching people was how she'd survived. Because being invisible meant noticing everything so she could avoid danger. Because he was the most fascinating, terrifying person she'd ever encountered. I watch everyone, Your Majesty, she said instead. It's how people like me stay alive. People like you. He laughed, but it was bitter. Half-breeds with no power. No pack standing. Nothing. Yes. He studied her, and Alara felt exposed, as if he could see straight through her skin to the truth beneath. You're afraid of me, Cale said, but it sounded like an observation, not a threat. Yet you're still here. Still watching. Alara's fingers twisted in her apron. Should I stop coming, Your Majesty? No, the answer came too quickly, and something flickered across his face, surprise at his own response. He turned away, moving to his desk with measured steps. You'll continue your duties. And you'll speak of what happened here to no one. Do you understand? Yes, Your Majesty. If I hear even a whisper that you've talked, he didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. Alara nodded and fled, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. Over the next 2 weeks, her duties expanded. Madame Voss assigned her to serve the Alpha King's meals, to manage his correspondence, to be present during his private meetings, to fetch documents or refresh drinks. It made no sense. Servants of her rank never got such access. Unless someone wanted her there. Unless he wanted her there. Alara began to notice patterns. The Alpha King's inner circle, Beta Marcus, Gamma Thorn, and his chief advisor Silas all knew how to interact with him. They stood in his line of sight. They spoke clearly, facing him directly. They never approached from behind without some warning. They'd adapted to him so seamlessly that no one outside that circle realized they were compensating for anything. It was brilliant. A conspiracy of protection hidden in plain sight. One evening, as Alara delivered dinner to his chambers, she found him standing at the window again, tension radiating from every line of his body. A letter lay crumpled on his desk. "Your Majesty? Your meal. Leave it." His voice was rough. She set the tray down, but something made her pause. "Is everything all right?" He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Raw. Wounded. Quickly masked, but she'd seen it. "When have you ever known an Alpha King's life to be all right?" He moved to the desk, pouring himself whiskey with controlled precision. "The Northern Pacts are threatening alliance. They think I'm weak because I haven't chosen a mate. Haven't produced an heir." Alara knew she should stay silent. Should leave. But the words came anyway. "You're not weak." His laugh was sharp. "You know nothing about me. I know you've ruled for 12 years. I know every pack in 5 kingdoms fears you. I know." She stopped herself, heat flooding her cheeks. "You know what?" He set down his glass, pinning her with that silver stare. "I know you're alone," she whispered. "And that takes a different kind of strength." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. Cale moved toward her, and Alara's heart raced. He stopped close enough that she could see the exhaustion hidden behind his mask of control, the weight of a crown he couldn't set down. "You see too much," he said quietly. "It's dangerous. I'm already in danger. I've been in danger since the day I was born." His hand lifted, and for a moment she thought he might touch her face. Instead, he caught a strand of her dark hair that had escaped her braid, rubbing it between his fingers as if testing its reality. "Why aren't you afraid of me right now?" he asked. "I am afraid." Her voice shook. "I'm terrified." "Then why are you still here?" "Because you're lonely. Because I understand what it means to hide who you are to survive. Because when you look at me, I don't feel invisible. Because you haven't dismissed me, Your Majesty." His mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. "Cale. When we're alone, call me Cale." It was the most dangerous thing he could have asked. Names had power. Intimacy had consequences. "I shouldn't." "I know." He released her hair, stepping back. "But I'm tired of titles. Tired of distance. Just, for a moment, let me hear my name from someone who isn't performing loyalty." "Cale." His name felt strange on her tongue. Forbidden. Right. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore. Again. "Cale." He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by the Alpha King's mask. "You should go. Before I do something we'll both regret." Alara fled, her mind reeling. The next morning, she found a book on her cot. Leather-bound, expensive, with pages about sign language and lip reading. No note. No explanation. But she knew who'd left it. Her hands trembled as she opened it, finding a single sentence written inside the cover in bold, masculine script. "Knowledge is survival. Use it wisely." Alara spent every spare moment studying. The book revealed a world she'd never imagined, ways to communicate without sound, ways to read meaning from the smallest gestures. And she began to understand the magnitude of what Cale had accomplished. To rule absolutely while missing one of the primary senses wolves relied on required genius-level adaptation, iron control, and a network of trusted conspirators willing to protect his secret with their lives. One evening, as she served his dinner, she found him in a rare moment of frustration. A messenger had delivered news. She could see the boy standing in the doorway, his mouth moving rapidly, panic in his eyes. Cale's jaw clenched. The boy was speaking too fast, turned partially away. "Speak clearly." Cale's voice cracked like a whip. "Face me and report properly." The messenger, young and terrified, stammered. His voice dropped further in fear. Cale's hands fisted on the desk. Without thinking, Alara moved to the messenger. "Breathe," she said gently. Look at His Majesty and speak slowly. He needs to understand everything. The boy nodded, turned fully toward Kale, and delivered his message clearly. The rogue attacks have increased, my king. 5 dead in the Eastern Territory. They're demanding audience with you. Kale's expression hardened. Tell them I'll meet them at the border at dawn. And send for Beta Marcus. The messenger left. Kale's eyes found Alara's. Something passed between them, gratitude, understanding, and a connection that terrified her in its intensity. Thank you, he said quietly. I didn't do anything, your mage, she caught herself. Kale. You did exactly what I needed. He stood, moving around the desk. Alara, I. The doors burst open. Beta Marcus entered, his face grim, followed by 3 council members. And from the fury in their eyes, Alara knew everything was about to change. Out, Beta Marcus commanded, his eyes locked on Alara. Now. But Kale's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stays. The council members exchanged glances. Elder Rowan, a silver-haired wolf with eyes like flint, Commander Darius, who led the King's Guard, and Lady Meredith, the pack's most influential female alpha. Your Majesty, Elder Rowan began, his tone carefully neutral, what we have to discuss is sensitive. Then speak. Kale moved behind his desk, every inch the ruthless king. But Alara noticed how he positioned himself to see all of them, how his eyes tracked each face. Marcus stepped forward. The rogues aren't just attacking anymore. They're talking. Spreading rumors. What kind of rumors? Kale's voice was deadly calm. About you. Commander Darius's hand rested on his sword hilt. They claim you're not fit to rule. That you're impaired. The word hung in the air like poison. Alara's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to become invisible, but she felt the weight of Lady Meredith's sharp gaze assessing her. Impaired, Kale repeated, his tone arctic. Explain. Marcus looked physically pained. They say you can't hear them coming. That the only reason you've survived this long is because your inner circle compensates for your weakness. Alara watched Kale's face remain perfectly controlled, but she saw what the others missed: the slight tightening around his eyes, the nearly imperceptible tension in his shoulders. And you believe these lies? Kale asked softly. Dangerously. No. Marcus's response was immediate. But others might. The pack is already unsettled. You have no mate, no heir. Now this. This what, Beta? Kale's power flooded the room, forcing everyone except Alara to their knees. She should have knelt too, but her weak wolf barely registered the command. Say it plainly. Elder Rowan spoke from his knees, his voice strained against the dominance pressing down. They know, my king. Someone has betrayed your secret. The rogues know you're deaf. The silence that followed was absolute. Alara's world tilted. They'd confirmed it. Out loud. The Alpha King's most dangerous secret, spoken in front of her. Which meant either they trusted her, or they planned to kill her. Kale's expression never changed. How long have you known the rogues possessed this information? 3 days, Marcus admitted. We've been investigating the source of the leak. And? Commander Darius cleared his throat. The last person executed for theft, Prima, she'd been meeting with rogue contacts. We believe she discovered your Majesty's condition and sold the information before we caught her. So you killed her for treason, not theft. Yes, my king. Kale finally released his dominance, allowing them to rise. His eyes swept over each of them before landing on Alara. She felt stripped bare under that gaze, as if he could see every thought in her head. Leave us, he said. All of you except the girl. Lady Meredith's eyebrows rose. Your Majesty, is that wise? Out. They fled. The moment the doors closed, Kale's careful control shattered. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. You heard, he said. Not a question. Yes. Alara's voice was barely a whisper. And now you know the truth. The pathetic reality behind the legend. He laughed bitterly. The great Alpha King, born defective. Broken. You're not broken. The words burst from her before she could stop them. You've ruled for 12 years with a disability that should have gotten you killed as a child. You've built a kingdom, commanded armies, kept an entire pack believing you're invincible. That's not weakness, that's extraordinary. He stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. You don't understand what this means. If the pack learns the truth, then we make sure they don't believe it. Alara stepped forward, her mind racing. The rogues have accusations. You have 12 years of absolute rule. Who do you think the pack will trust? Eventually, someone will test me. We'll create a situation where my deafness is undeniable. Then we adapt. She thought of the book he'd given her, the patterns she'd observed. Your inner circle has been protecting you for years. Let me help. You? His laugh was sharp. You're nobody. A half-breed servant with no power, no standing. Exactly. Nobody watches nobodies. Alara moved closer, her heart pounding. I can be your ears where they can't. I can move through the palace, through the pack, gathering information you'd never hear otherwise. I see things others miss because people don't notice me. Kale studied her intently, and Alara felt the weight of his intelligence assessing every angle. Why would you risk this? If you're caught helping me, they'll kill you. They'll kill me anyway eventually. At least this way, I matter. The words hung between them, raw and honest. You matter, Kale said quietly, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. You've mattered since the moment you looked at me and saw a person instead of a monster. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I should send you away. Should kill you to protect the secret. But you won't. No, his voice roughened. Because I'm selfish. Because for the first time in my life, someone knows the truth and doesn't look at me with pity or disgust. You look at me like you're extraordinary, Alara finished. Because you are. Kale's control snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers in a kiss that stole her breath and ignited every nerve. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, hungry, a drowning man finding air. Alara's hands fisted in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor, her weak wolf singing with recognition. Mate. 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 No. That was impossible. Alpha kings didn't mate with servants. Didn't bind themselves to half-breeds. Kale pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes molten silver. That was. A howl split the night. Then another. And another. The rogue attack had begun. The palace erupted into chaos. Howls of warning echoed from the guard towers, and through the windows, Alara could see torches blazing in the forest, dozens of them, surrounding the palace grounds. Kale's hand dropped from her face as he strode to the window, his expression hardening into the mask of the Alpha King. But Alara saw the tension in his spine, the way his eyes tracked the visible threats while his jaw clenched against the sounds he couldn't hear. The door slammed open. Beta Marcus burst in, his face flushed with exertion. They're at the gates. At least 50 rogues, maybe more. They're demanding you come out and face their leader. Who leads them? Kale's voice was ice. Garrett Blackwood. The exile from 3 years ago. Alara saw Kale's expression darken. She'd heard whispers about Blackwood, a former commander who'd challenged Kale's authority and lost. Barely escaped with his life. He wants a public challenge, Marcus continued, positioning himself directly in Kale's line of sight. Says if you refuse, he'll tell everyone why you can't hear him coming. It was a trap. A calculated move to force Kale into a fight where his deafness would be exposed before the entire pack. Assemble the guard, Kale commanded. I'll meet him at dawn in the ceremonial grounds. My King Marcus's face paled. He'll use sound against you. Attacking from behind, coordinating with calls you can't hear. I know the risks, Beta. Kale's voice was sharp. But I won't hide. I won't let them see their king as a coward. Alara's mind raced. She stepped forward before fear could stop her. Then don't fight alone. Every eye in the room turned to her. Explain, Kale said softly. The pack knows you never fight with backup, you don't need it. But if your Beta and Gamma stood with you tomorrow, it wouldn't seem like weakness. It would seem like you're honoring Blackwood with a proper reception. She locked eyes with Kale. And they can be positioned to compensate. To watch your blind spots. Marcus's eyes widened with understanding. The girl's right. We could. No, Kale's voice cut like a whip. I won't risk appearing weak by needing assistance against an exile. You're risking everything on pride. Alara's words burst out before she could stop them. The room went deathly silent. She just shouted at the Alpha King. But Kale didn't strike her down. His eyes blazed as he stalked toward her. You forget yourself. Maybe. Alara's hands trembled, but she held her ground. Or maybe I'm the only one here who'll tell you the truth. You've survived this long by being smart, not just strong. Tomorrow isn't about proving you don't need help, it's about winning. The muscle in Kale's jaw jumped. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, and Alara was certain she'd gone too far. Then he turned to Marcus. Prepare the ceremonial grounds. Beta and Gamma will flank me during the challenge. Make it look like protocol, not necessity. Marcus exhaled in relief. Yes, my king. And double the guard around the palace. I want eyes on every entrance, every weak point. Kale's gaze swept back to Alara. You. Come with me. He strode from the room, and Alara hurried after him, her heart hammering. He led her through a hidden door behind a tapestry, into a narrow stone corridor lit by torches. Their footsteps echoed off the walls as they climbed a spiral staircase. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere we can speak freely. They emerged onto a tower balcony overlooking the entire kingdom. The moon hung full and heavy above them, painting everything in silver light. Below, she could see the rogue fires burning at the forest's edge. Kale gripped the stone railing, his knuckles white. I was 7 when I realized I was different. I'd never heard my mother's voice, never heard the songs the pack sang under the full moon. My father discovered the truth when I failed to respond to a command shouted from behind me. His voice was hollow. He called me abomination. Said I'd doom the pack if anyone knew. Alara's heart broke for the child he'd been. He trained me anyway. Made me learn to read lips, to sense vibrations, to compensate. But he also made sure I understood one mistake, one moment where the deafness showed, and he'd kill me himself to protect the bloodline's honor. Kale turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. When I was 17, he grew sick. Weak. And I knew if he died naturally, the pack would discover my secret during the morning hells I couldn't hear. So I challenged him. Killed him in front of everyone before he could expose me. Kale, Alara reached for him, but he stepped back. I murdered my own father to keep my secret. What does that make me? A survivor, she said firmly. Someone who did what he had to do. Or a monster. His laugh was bitter. And tomorrow, Blackwood will prove which one I really am. Because he knows my weakness, and he'll exploit it. He'll coordinate his rogues with howls and calls I can't hear. He'll make sure everyone sees their king failing, vulnerable. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. How? The word was almost desperate. Even with Marcus and Thorn flanking me, they can't cover every angle. The moment I miss a coordinated attack, the moment I turn the wrong way. You'll have me. Kale stared at her. What? Alara's mind was already forming the plan. Put me in the crowd. Close to the fight. I can watch, listen, signal you if I see something you can't hear. She gripped his arms. We've been developing our own language, haven't we? The way you position documents when you want me to fetch something specific. The way I set your cup down to indicate who's approaching. We can expand that. You'd be in danger. If Blackwood or anyone else realizes what you're doing. I'm already in danger. We all are. She stepped closer, looking up at him. Let me help you. Let me be your ears. Kale's hand rose, cradling her face with a tenderness that contradicted his lethal reputation. If anything happens to you. The words died as his lips found hers. This kiss was different from the first, slower, deeper, filled with desperation and something that felt dangerously like devotion. When they finally broke apart, Kale rested his forehead against hers. I can't lose you, he whispered. I don't know when you became essential, but you are. Then don't lose tomorrow, Alara whispered back. Below them, another howl rose from the rogues, a sound of impending war. And neither of them knew that in the shadows of the palace, Lady Meredith watched from her own tower window, her expression calculating, a sealed letter in her hand addressed to the Council of 5 Kingdoms. The real betrayal hadn't come from a dead servant. It was coming from inside Kale's own court. Dawn broke blood-red across the horizon. Alara stood in the servants' staging area, her hands shaking as she fastened a simple grey cloak, the uniform of palace attendants allowed to witness official pack business. Around her, other servants whispered nervously about the challenge, but none of them knew what she knew. None of them understood that today, the Alpha King fought for more than dominance. He fought for survival. Steady yourself, Mira whispered, appearing at her elbow. You look like you're about to faint. I'm fine, Alara lied. She'd spent the hours before dawn with Kale, Marcus, and Thorn, developing signals. A hand pressed to her throat meant attack from behind. Fingers to her temple meant left side. A touch to her heart meant right. Simple. Subtle. Potentially deadly if discovered. The maid grows bold. Alara spun to find Lady Meredith standing behind her, resplendent in deep purple silks, her dark hair coiled like a crown. The older woman's smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. Lady Meredith. Alara dropped into a curtsy, her pulse spiking. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Mira shot Alara a worried glance, but there was no refusing a council member. Alara followed Lady Meredith through the palace corridors, away from the other servants, into a quiet alcove overlooking the ceremonial grounds. Below, workers were setting up barriers, creating a fighting circle large enough for shifted wolves. The pack was already gathering hundreds of wolves in human form, their energy crackling with anticipation. You've become quite close to our king, Lady Meredith said casually, her eyes on the grounds below. Alara's mouth went dry. I serve His Majesty as commanded. Oh, you do more than that, dear. Lady Meredith turned, and her expression was sharp as a blade. I've watched you these past weeks. The way you position yourself. The way he looks at you. The private meetings, the books he gives you, the tower visits in the dead of night. Fear flooded Alara's veins. I don't know what you. Don't insult my intelligence. Lady Meredith stepped closer, her voice dropping. I know what Kale is. I've known for years. His father confided in me before he died, or rather, before Kale killed him. Alara's breath stopped. Surprised? You shouldn't be. There are 3 people in this kingdom who know the truth. Marcus and Thorn, who've protected him since childhood. And me. Her smile was cold. I've spent 12 years maintaining his secret, ensuring his rule remained absolute. Do you know why? Alara shook her head, unable to speak. Because a strong king, even a deaf one, is better than the chaos of a power vacuum. Better than civil war. Lady Meredith's eyes hardened. But that was before he started taking foolish risks. Before he let a half-breed servant into his confidence. Before he let emotion cloud his judgment. He hasn't. He's falling in love with you. The words hit like a physical blow. Perhaps he's already fallen. And that makes you the greatest threat to this kingdom's stability. Alara's hands clenched in her cloak. I would never hurt him. No. But you make him vulnerable. Distracted. Weak. Lady Meredith pulled a letter from her sleeve, the same sealed letter Alara had glimpsed the night before. This is addressed to the Council of 5 Kingdoms. It details Kale's condition, his deception, and his unsuitability for rule. One word from me, and everything he's built crumbles. Horror washed over Alara. You'd destroy him? After protecting him for 12 years? I'd save this kingdom from a king who's lost his edge. Lady Meredith's voice was steel. Kale was brilliant when he was ruthless, when nothing mattered more than maintaining control. But now? He risks everything for a girl with no power, no standing, no worth to the pack. The words cut deep, but Alara raised her chin. Then why tell me? Why not just send the letter? Because I'm giving you a choice. Lady Meredith held out the letter. Take this. Disappear. Leave the palace, leave the kingdom, and never contact Kale again. Do that, and his secret remains safe. I'll destroy the letter and continue protecting him as I always have. And if I refuse? Then I send this letter the moment today's challenge ends. The 5 kingdoms will demand Cale's abdication. And when he refuses, because we both know he will, they'll declare war. Thousands will die. The kingdom will burn. Lady Meredith's eyes bored into her. All because you were too selfish to walk away. Alara's world tilted. She thought of Cale's hands cradling her face, his whispered confession that she'd become essential. She thought of his loneliness, the weight of a crown he'd carried alone for so long. And she thought of thousands dead because she dared to matter. How do I know you'll keep your word? Alara's voice cracked. You don't. But you know with certainty what happens if you stay. Lady Meredith pressed the letter into Alara's shaking hands. Choose wisely, child. His life depends on it. She swept away, leaving Alara alone with the weight of an impossible decision. The ceremonial grounds were packed when Alara stumbled outside, her mind reeling. She clutched the letter like it might burn through her fingers, Lady Meredith's ultimatum echoing in her skull. Leave, and he lives. Stay, and he falls. Trumpets blared the signal of the Alpha King's arrival. The crowd parted as Cale strode onto the grounds, flanked by Marcus and Thorn. He was devastating in black leather, his massive frame radiating lethal power. But Alara saw what others missed: the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes swept the crowd looking for her. When he found her in the press of bodies, relief flashed across his face. Then their eyes locked, and Alara's heart shattered. Because she knew what she had to do. Across the fighting circle, a massive man emerged from the rogue crowd. Garrett Blackwood was a beast of a wolf, 6.5 feet of scarred muscle, his grin feral as he shifted his weight like a predator. Behind him, 50 rogues watched with hungry eyes. Alpha King. Blackwood's voice boomed across the grounds. I challenge your right to rule. The pack erupted in shouts and howls. Cale's expression never changed, but Alara saw his jaw tighten. He couldn't hear the howls, couldn't hear the coordination happening among the rogues as they spread around the circle's perimeter. This wasn't just a challenge. It was an execution disguised as honor. And Alara was the only one who could save him if she stayed. But staying meant condemning him to war. To exposure. To everything Lady Meredith had threatened. Alara looked at the letter in her hands. Then at Cale, who stood alone in the center of the circle despite the wolves flanking him, waiting for a fight that would expose every weakness. Her fingers tightened on the paper. And she made her choice. Alara tore the letter into pieces. Let Lady Meredith send a dozen more, she didn't care. She'd spent her entire life being told she was nothing, that she didn't matter, that her only value was in staying invisible. But Cale had seen her. Had trusted her. Had looked at her like she was essential. And she refused to abandon him now. She shoved through the crowd, positioning herself where Cale could see her in his peripheral vision. His eyes flicked to her for a heartbeat, and she saw the question there: are you ready? Alara nodded once. Blackwood circled the fighting ring, his movements predatory. 12 years you've ruled, Thornheart. 12 years of lies. His voice carried across the grounds, and Alara watched the rogues spreading out, their positions deliberate. Strategic. They were planning something. You claim to be the strongest wolf in 5 kingdoms, Blackwood continued, but I know your secret. I know what you can't. Cale's transformation cut off his words. Power exploded through the air as the Alpha King shifted, bones restructuring, muscle expanding, until a massive black wolf stood where the man had been. Easily twice the size of any normal wolf, with silver eyes that gleamed with lethal intelligence. The crowd gasped. Even after 12 years, the sight of their king's wolf stole breath. Blackwood grinned and shifted to a huge gray beast with scars crisscrossing his hide. Not as large as Cale, but faster. More agile. And he had 50 rogues coordinating around the circle's edge. The fight began. Blackwood lunged, and Cale met him with savage precision. They collided in a clash of fangs and fury, tearing at each other with deadly intent. Blood sprayed across the dirt. The crowd roared. But Alara watched the rogues. Watched how 3 of them had positioned themselves directly behind Cale, outside his line of sight. How they shifted their weight, preparing to. She pressed her hand to her throat. Behind. Kale's ear twitched, the only sign he'd seen her signal. He spun just as two rogues broke from the circle, charging his back. His massive jaws caught one by the throat while his claws ripped into the other. The crowd erupted in confusion. This was supposed to be a one-on-one challenge, but the rogues had broken protocol. Marcus and Thorn moved instantly, blocking other rogues from entering the circle, but Alara saw the pattern. Blackwood was using his pack to create chaos, to attack from angles Kale couldn't track. 3 more rogues held a coordinated signal. Blackwood lunged from the front while 4 others rushed from different sides, their timing perfect. Impossible for one wolf to track, even with perfect hearing. Alara's hands moved in rapid succession. Throat. Temple. Heart. Kale became a whirlwind of death. He twisted, catching the throat attack with his fangs while his body slammed into the left side attacker. His back paws kicked out, catching the right side rogue square in the chest with a crunch of breaking ribs. But Blackwood's teeth sank into Kale's shoulder, tearing through muscle. Kale's howl of pain split the air, a sound Alara felt in her bones even if he couldn't hear it himself. Blood poured from the wound, dark and hot. Blackwood had hit an artery. Alara's heart stopped. If Kale didn't end this now, he'd bleed out. The rogues sensed victory. They pressed closer, howling coordinates that their leader could hear but Kale couldn't. Blackwood circled, his eyes gleaming with triumph, waiting for blood loss to slow the Alpha King enough to land a killing blow. But they'd made a mistake. They'd assumed Kale's strength came from hearing them. That his power relied on traditional wolf senses. They didn't understand that Kale Thornheart had spent his entire life learning to win fights he should have lost. Alara watched as Kale's movements changed. He stopped trying to track every rogue, stopped defending from all angles. Instead, he focused entirely on Blackwood, his silver eyes locked on his opponent with terrifying intensity. When Blackwood lunged again, Kale didn't dodge. He took the attack head-on, letting Blackwood's momentum carry them both to the ground. Teeth sank into his side, his leg, his neck, but Kale didn't let go of his target. His massive jaws clamped down on Blackwood's throat and held, even as his own blood soaked the ground. It was a death grip. Neither wolf could release without being killed by the other. But Kale was stronger. Had always been stronger. And he was willing to die if it meant taking Blackwood with him. The crowd fell silent. Even the rogues stopped moving, watching their leader struggle and fail to break free. Blackwood's eyes widened with panic, his claws tearing at Kale's chest, desperate to escape. Kale's jaws tightened. Bones cracked. Blackwood went limp. Kale released him and staggered back, blood pouring from a dozen wounds. He shifted back to human form, his body shaking with effort, his skin pale from blood loss. But he was standing. The rogue leader was not. Does anyone else question my right to rule? Kale's voice rang out across the stunned grounds, strong despite his injuries. Silence. Then, one by one, the rogues dropped to their knees. Submitted. The pack erupted in howls of victory, howls Kale couldn't hear but could feel vibrating through his bones as hundreds of wolves acknowledged their king. Alara was already running before Marcus and Thorn reached Kale. She shoved through the crowd, her healer's training from her mother taking over. She had to stop the bleeding, had to. Kale's silver eyes found hers across the distance. And he smiled. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed. No. Alara screamed, racing toward him. Marcus caught Kale before he hit the ground, but blood was everywhere, too much blood. Get the healers. Thorn roared. But Alara was already there, pressing her hands against the worst wounds, trying desperately to slow the bleeding. Stay with me, she begged, her tears falling onto his face. Kale, stay with me. You won. You proved them all wrong. You can't leave now. His hand lifted weakly, touching her face. His lips moved, forming words only she could read. Worth it. You're worth everything. Then his eyes closed, and his hand fell. 3 days. For 3 days, Alara sat beside Kale's bed while healers worked to save his life. The arterial wound in his shoulder had been the worst. He'd lost so much blood that even his alpha healing struggled to compensate. Infection set in on the 2nd day, sending him into a fever that had him thrashing and calling out names in his delirium. Most often, he called for her. Alara held his hand through all of it, whispering stories he couldn't hear, willing him to fight. To survive. Marcus and Thorn took shifts standing guard, but they gave her space, understanding something had shifted between their king and the half-breed Maid. Understanding that she mattered to him in ways that defied logic or pack law. On the morning of the fourth day, Cale's eyes finally opened. Elara. His voice was rough, barely a whisper. She was on her feet instantly, leaning over him. I'm here. Don't try to move, you're still healing. His hand found hers, gripping with surprising strength. The challenge. Blackwood. Dead. The rogue submitted. You won. Relief flooded through her as color returned to his face. You scared me half to death, but you won. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I had help. You had a suicidal strategy, she corrected, but her voice shook with emotion. Taking all those attacks head-on, letting yourself get torn apart, was the only way to prove I don't need perfect senses to be their king. His silver eyes locked on hers. And I had you watching my back. I knew you wouldn't let me fall. Tears burned Elara's eyes. I almost wasn't there. She told him everything, then Lady Meredith's ultimatum, the letter, the impossible choice. Cale's expression darkened with each word, his jaw clenching. She threatened you. Threatened to expose everything unless you left. His voice was deadly quiet. Where is she now? I don't know. She vanished after the challenge. Elara squeezed his hand. But it doesn't matter. I tore up her letter. I'm not going anywhere. You should have left. But his grip on her hand tightened, contradicting his words. You should have saved yourself. From what? A life of invisibility? Of not mattering? Elara shook her head. You gave me something worth fighting for. Worth risking everything for. Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her down, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was gentle despite the desperation beneath it. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Good thing I'm not asking for permission. His laugh turned into a wince as the movement pulled his healing wounds. Careful. The healer said I need rest. Then rest. Elara settled back in her chair, but she didn't let go of his hand. I'll be here when you wake up. Promise? Promise. 2 weeks later, Cale was strong enough to call a full pack assembly. Elara stood in the crowd, her heart hammering as every wolf in the kingdom gathered in the ceremonial grounds. Whispers swirled around her, speculation about why the Alpha King had summoned them, rumors about the half-breed servant who'd been seen leaving his chambers at all hours. The whispers died the moment Cale appeared. He stood on the raised platform, commanding and powerful despite the healing scars visible on his neck and arms. Marcus and Thorn flanked him, and to everyone's surprise, Lady Meredith stood with the council members. She'd returned the day before, claiming she'd been visiting allied packs. But the look she gave Elara was pure venom. My wolves, Cale's voice carried across the grounds. You've heard rumors. Speculation about weakness, about secrets, about my fitness to rule. He paused, his silver eyes sweeping the crowd. Today, I give you truth. Elara's breath caught. What was he doing? I am deaf. The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled wolves. I was born without hearing. My father considered killing me for it. Instead, he taught me to compensate, to adapt, to become strong enough that it wouldn't matter. The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Lady Meredith's face went pale. For 12 years, I've hidden this truth, believing it made me weak. Believing you wouldn't follow a king with a disability. Cale's voice grew stronger. But I was wrong. My deafness doesn't define my strength. Defeating Blackwood while wounded and outnumbered proved that. Leading this kingdom to prosperity proved that. He stepped forward, and the crowd instinctively quieted to hear him. I've ruled you fairly. Protected you fiercely. Built alliances that ensure our survival. And I did it all while carrying a secret that could have destroyed me. His eyes found Elara's in the crowd. But I'm done hiding. Done pretending. If you want a different king, challenge me now. Face me in the circle and prove I'm unfit. Silence. Not a single wolf moved. Then, from the back of the crowd, an old warrior stepped forward. Alara recognized him, Commander Darius, who'd fought beside Cale for years. "I've served you since you took the throne, my king," Darius said, his voice carrying. "And in 12 years, I've never seen you fail. Never seen you falter. If you did all that while deaf," he dropped to one knee. "Then you're the strongest wolf I've ever known." Another wolf knelt. Then another. Like a wave, the entire pack dropped to their knees, submitting to their king not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. Even Lady Meredith knelt, though her expression was unreadable. Cale's eyes glistened, but his voice remained steady. "Rise. All of you." When they stood, he continued. "There's one more truth I need to share." He descended from the platform, walking directly toward Alara. The crowd parted, and her heart hammered as he stopped in front of her. "This woman saved my life. Multiple times." Cale's voice was clear, meant for everyone to hear. "She saw my weakness and didn't exploit it. She learned to help me, to protect me, to stand beside me when I needed it most." He took her hand, pulling her forward despite her protests. "She's a half-breed with no pack standing. No power. No traditional worth by our laws." His fingers intertwined with hers. "And she's my mate." The crowd gasped. Alara stared at him, shock stealing her voice. "Cale. My wolf recognized you weeks ago. I was too stubborn to admit it." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But I'm done denying what I feel. Done letting pack politics dictate my heart." He turned to face the assembly, still holding her hand. "I claim Alara as my mate and future queen. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly." Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then Marcus stepped forward, a rare smile on his face. "Finally. Took you long enough, you stubborn bastard." Thorn laughed. "Congratulations, my king. And welcome to the pack, my queen." The crowd erupted not in protest, but in celebration. Howls of approval filled the air, and Alara felt tears streaming down her face as Cale pulled her into his arms. "Are you insane?" she whispered against his chest. "They'll never accept." "They already have." He tilted her face up, his eyes blazing with emotion. "And even if they hadn't, I'd choose you. Every time. In every life." His kiss stole her breath and her fears, replacing them with a joy so profound it felt like flying. When they finally broke apart, the crowd was cheering a sound Cale couldn't hear but could feel vibrating through the ground, through Alara's laughter, through the future they'd build together. "I love you," Alara said, knowing he'd read the words on her lips. "My impossible, stubborn, extraordinary king." Cale smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from terrifying to beautiful. "I love you too. My brave, essential, perfect queen." 6 months later. Alara stood in the tower where Cale had first confessed his truth, watching the kingdom spread out below. Behind her, strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against a familiar chest. "What are you thinking about?" Cale's voice rumbled against her ear. She turned in his arms, reaching up to sign the words she'd been practicing. "How far we've come." His eyes lit up. He'd been learning sign language too, adding another layer to their unique communication. "We have far yet to go," he signed back. "Together," Alara said aloud, knowing he'd read her lips. "Together," he agreed, and kissed her as the sun set over a kingdom that had learned the truth. True strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to show your scars and strong enough to keep fighting anyway. And in each other, they'd found exactly that. The end. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, beautiful souls. If you loved Cale and Alara's story, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you thought. Should I create more werewolf romance stories? What tropes do you want to see next? And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join our pack and never miss another epic love story. Until next time, keep believing in love that defies all odds. This is your girl, signing off.